Niners have played the Seahawks 6 times in the last 3 years, obviously. Deebo Samuel's only played in half of those games. And I think one thing is clear, not to go back to Deebo's offseason, but this team would be in major trouble without him. If they're a playoff team, then Deebo is going to be an MVP level player again. I think that much is clear. He's been really good in his Seahawks games, over 100 yards receiving in all those games. And this game, obviously, Trey is a big part of it. But to me, the way Geno played the other day, this is not going to be the kind of game where you have to show off your arm strength, I don't think, for Trey, right? It's not going to be about scoring 40 points. It's going to be about limiting mistakes. This game, to me, is the two Ds, Deebo Samuel and the defensive line. DK and Tyler Lockett, Marquise Goodwin, they want to target Hufanga like the Bears did in the second half, fine. But the D-line can make it much more difficult for Geno Smith than his stat line made it look the other night.
Well, one thing that on Monday night, I've always been a believer in this guy, so I get a little joy in watching him bust off some runs. You know, like we talked about it, everyone was talking about it while Denver couldn't tackle a soul. Like, that's not going to be the Niners' issue with tackling Penny. Like, if they are around him, he's going to the ground. Now, he might break a tackle or two throughout the game, but it ain't going to look run after run. It looked like he was at San Diego State again. So what is Pete going to want to do? Slow down the game, run the ball, and then take deep shots off that? It should be, in theory, and in reality, much more difficult to run the ball for Seattle against this team. And if they can't run the ball, then they become pretty one-dimensional. Where, on the flip side, the 49ers should be able to figure out how to run the ball, which derailed the game on Sunday in a monsoon, right? Their running game was, which you would say historically, with Kyle, when they've been good, when the run game goes, that's when they are vulnerable. So that's not a knock on Trey or even Jimmy. Like, the offense has been predicated because they don't have Mahomes and they don't have Josh Allen, they don't have Herbert. They do consistently have to run the ball at a pretty high clip and be effective when their head coach, who is a run game first guy, is calling these runs. And I would say that's back to your take on Deebo. Like, I wouldn't be shocked to see him keep getting the rock, right?
You're saying even on run plays.
Well, watching Kyle talk about these young running backs, which we've been hammering, like, why isn't Ty Davis Price playing? Well, as Kyle said, like, it's more than just running the ball between the tackles for him. Does he know where to line up? And my take always is, as a personnel guy, well, tell him where to line up. Have Kyle tell him where to line up. Like, he is really talented. Give him 5 plays.
Kyle Juszczyk. Or Kyle
Juszczyk.
Yeah.
Like, the entire playbook is too much for him. Understandable. It was too much for Jimmy at first. It was too much for Matt Ryan. Like, it's complicated. But this guy's really talented, and your drop-off at running back is pretty high. So why did Mason dress over Ty Davis Price? Well, where'd Mason go to school? Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech's basically Stanford fucking Northwestern. He's probably pretty smart. But, like, and special teams, Kyle said. Well, I understand that if the guy's going to be a third running back, but you're going to need a number one running back. And the one thing Kyle kept talking about when they asked him about Jeff Wilson was like, he knows everything. He's very reliable. And this is where personnel people and coaches butt heads. Like, yeah, I'm sure Jeff Wilson is a great guy, good teammate, knows the playbook like the back of his hand. He's not as good. Like, it's just, and that's the balance in the sport of football, like the difference of being able to rely on someone and having him know, and then him being able to make plays. Like, ultimately with Jamal Adams, it feels like Jamal Adams pretty good football guy. Like, he understands where to line up. He just has fundamental flaws, right? Can't cover, can't catch. So I bet Pete, like, I love Jamal's mindset. I love being able to use him. But, like, there's just some basic, like, well, football game just becomes football. And then Jamal's back there against said tight end or running back, and he looks lost. You know, so it's like Jeff Wilson, everything beside once the ball is snapped, I bet fucking any coach would love him. Andy, Belichick. But eventually, like, you got to hit the hole. And maybe that was just because of the game, and maybe he'll shut me up. But if it's another game where it's like, God, he's just not hitting it fast enough, guy, that's a problem for this team that all we've said is, like, they're going to be like last year's Patriots on steroids. Run the ball down your throat, play D, and hit some bombs. Well, you can't do that if you can't just run basic plays, right, with your running back gashing them. It's that Elijah Mitchell, man. I mean, we've talked about it all week. Sneaky, massive loss.
Yeah, well, you don't want Deebo and Trey to be your two leading rushers. You definitely don't want Trey to be one of your leading ball carriers. And that's what he was the other day, right? 13 carries. And part of it is the hits that he takes. Part of it is I still don't think he looks that comfortable in anything other than short yardage. And so he's taking big hits, but I do think he feels extra susceptible when he's running the ball because he just is not comfortable yet, either getting down or deciding to run out, or I think sometimes he's searching for a 12-yard gain where there's only 4, whatever it is. Like I went and watched Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes' first starts. I mean, Mahomes' first opener, not the Week 17 game, but the opener against the Chargers, and Josh Allen's Week 2 Charger game. And and they were different games. Like Mahomes, Andy Reid got him a bunch of wide open throws, and Mahomes hit him. And Tyreek Hill was unfreaking believable that day. Tyreek was incredible. Josh Allen was all over the place. He was just fucking
his team's not nearly.
His team's not as good. Yeah. But one thing that did stand out with both, especially like Josh when he ran, was he knew what he was doing. I'm just running. And that continued week 1 against Chicago, and we saw some signs of it last year with Trey. Now, again, Trey hasn't played a lot of football. I think the footing that he had in Chicago, the poor footing, the wet field might have contributed to him not looking very decisive. Again, in anything other than the design short game, I thought he looked decisive. But when it came time to try and pick up 8 yards just because nothing was going on, it's just not as smooth, which is fine. 13 carries for Trey Lance. He doesn't avoid the hits. And you just cannot have him be, your second best running back.
You think you judge him more harshly, and just people in general do? I mean, Mark's crushed him. I guess he's a runner, but he's pretty terrible at it because we've seen so many running quarterbacks over the last several years. Like, it's so clear. Like, it's hard to watch a game.
I think it's because we watched him break up. We watched his college tape, and he had some big runs.
How about the one in practice? Remember, like mid-training camp when he took it 80?
Doesn't count.
It's almost like they can't tackle you in practice.
Yeah.
I think part of the problem, Guy, is I think there's just an unknown of what this guy does really well right now that people just don't know. At first, like Jalen Hurts. I remember when he was coming out, I'm like, listen, I do not see it as a quarterback. I think you should move him to running back. Now, he has become a much better quarterback than I ever thought, but I watched the Lions Eagle game, and when I say watch, like I was doing other stuff and had it in the background of my iPad. He is an elite runner. And think about it. Where was he a good runner? At Alabama, at Oklahoma. And what did he do immediately well when he got to the Eagles? Run. He's just very natural, and he is closer to Trey. Like Lamar and Kyler have nothing in common with Trey, right? They are like 4-2 guys. They're Marquise Goodwin, but they play quarterback. And then there's Josh Allen, which I'd argue doesn't really have much in common with Trey because he's fucking stiff-arming people like he's Julio Jones or Derrick Henry. Like when he runs, he goes, I am bigger than every single person beside the D lineman, and I'm going to make you pay. So he's even in his different category. Jalen is not running over anybody, and he's not a 4-4 guy. Maybe he could run that if he trained, but like when you watch him run, he doesn't look like he's running that fast, but his play speed's pretty good. But his innate natural skills, and you even said, like, I think it was before we hopped on, it's kind of a natural, you just take off. It's like just a natural element of football. Like you get it when you're in junior high and you just like playing touch football. There are some guys that are just good with the ball in their hands. And typically once they get to high school football, like that's your running back, right? And that's your wide receiver because it's like they're pretty just skilled. And only a small percentage of people have it. And I watched Trey's press conference on Wednesday, and they asked him what the biggest difference is of the NFL and his college. He's like, obviously guys are a lot bigger, faster, stronger. Basically saying like, this is a huge separating element of the athlete I went to now. Like Jalen would say, well, yeah, I was at Alabama every day in practice for 3 years. I went up against, he would just start listing off guys. They're all starting all over the league, right? Have you seen that thing going like, people keep tweeting Bama had the most starters and Bama has the most money in the league. It's like, of course. And then he goes to Oklahoma and he probably played consistently less NFL guys on a weekly basis, but he had trained and probably got to hone his skill. And you just wonder with Trey, like this goes back to what we talked about a couple days ago about Kyle saying it was what Joe Davis said on the broadcast. like the transition, it was his lack of experience. I think that translates into just basic things of like, he didn't really just get to hammer home his confidence as a runner. Like the one, like Kaepernick, for example. When Kaepernick came to the Niners as a runner, he had fucking mastered running the football with the little general, right? You and I had saw him. When I was at Fresno State, I think Kaepernick had multiple games. Both games were over 100 yards against us.
Well,
Every single game.
Rusher.
Yeah, but like what his game in college was really predicated on running the ball. Like he came raw passer, but elite runner. It's like Trey's kind of this ball of clay on both ends.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy, wouldn't you say? Because most guys typically like running is the easiest part.
Sure.
Michael Vick was like, I had to learn. Steve Young, I had to learn how to throw. Running was no problem.
Right.
So Trey can't even just separate. Even Russell Wilson early on, like could run around. Deshaun Watson run around. Which is some of these guys that are shitting on him. Like he doesn't really hang his hat on one thing. Like right now, at any moment, even though it might not be what we need, I'll just run for 100 yards. Feels like it'd be hard for him to run for 100 yards.
Yeah, I don't think that's which ultimately is not going to make or break him, right? Like in terms of his career, it's going to be about his ability to throw the ball. He is mobile enough that if he can throw the football efficiently, then he's going to create plays with his legs, create other throws, pick up 7 yards when there's nothing there. Like that's not, I don't worry about it so much as it's just an observation that's one thing that I think we can, maybe he gets better at it, but it's very apparent when you watch that it's kind of something he's not very comfortable with. But ultimately, whether he was comfortable with it or not, I don't want him carrying the ball 13 times. Like that's the point. Whether he's comfortable running the ball or not, 13 carries, which is what he had the other day. It's not, he had the 16 carry game. That's just not ideal because
think about this. If you're
that is what I'm going to do. And that's why Jimmy Garoppolo's sitting over there.
Yeah. I wonder if they're just going to like, this is what he can do right now effectively.
That's what they did with RG3, right?
Yeah. Because I can't have him throw it 50 times a game. 50 would be high, but you know what I mean? 38.
Right.
Which is.
Shouldn't have to this week, though.
Shouldn't have to. Yeah. I mean, they're a massive favorite for a reason. Also, short week, team coming off a huge emotional high. Niners coming off a loss. Like, it's all there for the Niners to come out strong. But it all gets back, like, defensively, Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, Juszczyk, Debo, like, Trent, like, no worries. Like, this guy, just, well, is he going to, like, when the ball's there to hit? Like, can he make the throw?
Yeah.
It's like, well, MIDDLEKAUFF, he led the league in explosive throws last week. Yeah, guys. I mean, we all watched it. 10 fucking points. Like, come on. Let's have a normal conversation. We're not shitting on the guy. We're not anointing the guy, but we can have a normal conversation of they scored 10 points. The other team scored 19. So it's not like they lost 40 to 10. They scored
should have been 21
points. What?
Bears missed 2 extra points. Should have been 21.
Good call.
Should have been an 11-point loss. The Bears covered the Niners line.
And they had the Hightower screw up, which might have been 3.
Look, there are games they will play, like when they
patted the grass. It's like, bro.
The
soil is soaked, man.
It's the earth, fellas. I don't think you're gonna get it all. The Rams week 4. Okay, the Chiefs week 7. The Rams week 8. The Chargers week 10. Sneaky Thursday night football. Niners play both of them. Like those are games where your really good roster is going to have to play really well, and Trey Lance is going to have to play really well. The Seahawks game to me is more just a straight up roster game. Your roster, take the quarterbacks out. Your roster is just better than their roster. So your defensive line, Mooney Ward, right? Nick Bosa, Ayuk and Debo, like your roster, although they have the 2 receivers, but your roster should just beat their roster. Your defensive line, they've got rookie tackles. 2. Each tackle is a rookie. Like your team should just beat that team just on roster as long as your quarterback makes no mistakes. But most games aren't like that, right? A lot of games are your quarterback the other quarterback's going to be really good and your quarterback's got to be good.
Big facts.
Big facts. So, yeah, I just, I think for all the pressure on him, and we'll talk about the pressure, this game actually doesn't require him to do anything crazy. But it does require Deebo Samuel to be Deebo Samuel. Brandon Ayuk, who was the whole offseason was about, not the whole offseason, but the preseason was all about Brandon Ayuk's about to be a star.
Offseason 2, remember, we were going to practice, it was kicking ass.
Yeah. And that's partly Trey, but that's a lot of Kyle. And that's just, I mean, that's
instead of giving him 3 targets, can we give the guy 7?
Yeah, 12 penalties. Can't do that, right? Roster was better than Chicago's. Yeah, it was a bad loss.
Horrendous loss.
That was everybody. That wasn't, I didn't walk away from that game going, Trey Lance cost them that game.
It was the second worst loss of the week when you factor in Dallas lost their starting quarterback.
Dallas lost not worse.
I would say it is when you factor in that Dak shattered his finger.
Oh, yeah. But I'm saying like the shame of the loss.
No, Dallas was an underdog in the game.
And I think Dallas is, yeah, there you go.
Yeah. I'm only factoring in Dak. If you remove Dak, not that crazy. A lot of people taking Tampa. There wasn't a soul. Even Bears fans were not feeling good, and they won.